Hi, Analisa Six here to bring you the June 2023 horoscope for the zodiac sign of Aries for sun and rising placements. From the solar curator, the Lady of Leisure, it's me. Hi, Aries. Aries, you really impressed me last month. I guess this month, it's May 27th when I'm recording this, but we're talking about June, so last month. But Aries, you guys are maybe my biggest fans. I mean, I'm a Leo, so I tend to get along with Aries really well, but I think I had, well, let's look. I'm going to look on my phone really quick at the stats for the May Aries video because you guys, Aries, you guys watched your horoscope video more than any other sign this month or ever. Like, I've never had this amount of Aries people tune in. And I'm just assuming they're Aries because why would you watch your horoscope if you're not an Aries? 152 views on the Aries horoscope video, which for me is a lot. I think that since I started doing horoscopes, that is my most watched horoscope video. It's not my most watched video on Instagram. I think my most watched video, sorry, not on Instagram, on YouTube has 2.2K views, and it's one that I did 6 years ago. That feels like a lifetime ago. I can't believe it was only 6 years ago. That feels like it was 15 years ago. But yeah, so 153, was that what I said? 52 video views on the Aries May 2023 horoscope. So yeah, you guys kind of beat out all the other signs in terms of being interested in what's going on with you. I'm trying to see who got second place here, just because maybe you're interested. It looks like Taurus got, no, Cancer got second place. Taurus and Leo were tied. Scorpio came after that, and then everybody else kind of fell around the same range. So yeah, it's interesting. Obviously too, we've been in Aries season. I mean, we haven't been in Aries season. We've been in Taurus and now Gemini season. But I think that, what I've found from when I started doing these videos, that the signs that are kind of more in their season tend to be more interested in their video. So even though we're out of your season, we already had Aries season. For some reason, I think that because we're still in that kind of little spring bubble, that's your time to shine. We did have a lot of planets in Aries. Maybe you guys are just so amped up on yourselves. That's why. But now that we're moving into June, we have the least amount of Aries energy that we've had pretty much all year. So let's go ahead and dive into your horoscope for the month of June. So June, we start out with Mercury in Taurus, and the area that that's been hitting in the chart for you has been the area of communication. So the Mercury retrograde that happened, I'm sorry, it's not the area of communication. I'm getting ahead of myself. This is the area that has to do with your finances. So the Mercury retrograde really impacted your finances in May. Now that it's direct, hopefully things with your finances are starting to come together a little bit better and you're feeling less stress and less chaos around it. But yeah, we're starting June out kind of with finishing that little bit of Mercury and Taurus in that area. One of the things that happened in May was Jupiter entered Taurus, and the area of the chart that this is hitting for the Aries also has to do with finances. So this is a really positive time for you to be kind of getting yourself in a place where you're thinking about how you want to expand upon the money that you're bringing into your life. One of the things about Jupiter passing through this area is that we have an ability to build a lot of financial abundance, but we equally have the ability to spend it just as fast as we're making it. And so it's important that, obviously indulging and having some fun with, your hard work and your hard-earned money is positive. But at the same time, we want to make sure that you're not just pissing it away, right? Like, are you investing in things that will have good long-term outcomes for yourself? And that's a very Taurus theme, is am I building upon what I'm working towards? But Jupiter isn't always about building. Jupiter can be just about growing and expanding. And sometimes we need to find that middle ground. So Jupiter is going to be in Taurus for the rest of the year. So you have a lot of opportunities to level up with finances. But yeah, again, you want to be careful with how you're spending those finances as well. Mercury is also making a conjunction with Uranus in June, and that's happening right now. I'm sorry, not right now. Right now in the chart that I'm looking at, which is in the beginning of June 5th, we have this conjunction happening between Uranus, June 4th and 5th, between Uranus and Mercury. So again, you know, this is the area that's affecting finances in the Aries sun and rising chart for the horoscope. And so this does impact, you know, maybe surprises around money that you weren't anticipating. That, you know, Uranus, it said most of the time it's not necessarily a good surprise, but I think it just depends on what ends up being surprising, right? So if you've been going through a lot of hardships and then all of a sudden it's exciting, you realize you have more money than you thought you did, that could be the surprise. The opposite could be true though, where all of a sudden you think you're doing better, you have this money, and then this Uranus conjunction happens and you're like, oh shit, this thing just came up that I didn't realize was coming up, and now I have to spend all this money on it, and I am not as prepared as I thought I was. However, with Jupiter here, Jupiter is kind of bringing some of that abundance and good fortune to this area now. So hopefully, if you do have any kind of surprises when it comes to finances, it's easily resolved, or you're given kind of an opportunity to recover quickly from it or grow from it in a way that's constructive. So Mercury is going to be in Taurus up until June 11th. And so let's go ahead and talk about, we're going to have a full moon happening on June 3rd. And so the June 3rd full moon is happening at 13 degrees of Sagittarius. And Sagittarius energy makes a trine to Aries energy, which is an easy flowing energy. And we actually have a fire trine happening during this new moon, where Pallas Athena, full moon. I've been talking, I just did the June video and I've been talking for like an hour. And so I get a little tongue twistery when I'm talking a lot, especially when there's numbers and planets and signs and all those things involved. So bear with me here. But we have a fire trine happening on this full moon. So the full moon is happening at 13 degrees of Sagittarius on June 3rd. And then we're going to have that trine happening with Pallas Athena, and also the Mars and Leo energy, I believe. I'm looking at a chart right now and I'm just trying to make sure that I'm looking at this right. I'm sorry. Pallas Athena is going to be in Leo at 13 degrees, making a trine to the Sagittarius moon at 13 degrees. And then that's also going to be making a trine to Chiron in Aries at 18 degrees. So even though Chiron's not an exact trine, it's not at 13 degrees, it's still within a 5-degree orb of influence, which is making this fire trine. And the area that the full moon is hitting for the Aries chart, the sun will be in the house of communication in Gemini. You know, it's in its home house in the Aries horoscope chart, and then it's going to be opposing the moon in that 9th house area. And so what comes up for review is our communication, the way that we're expressing ourselves around how we are gathering information and articulating that information. The moon here also has to do with our values, our belief systems. It also has to do with how we're teaching and learning and absorbing information. And so this full moon, the big theme for Aries is, what is your relationship to your perceived values, belief systems? And are you living in alignment with those values or those belief systems? You might feel a pressure or an urgency to evolve in some way around that. Full moons can be about manifesting more of those things into our life. They can also be about us recognizing when we're not in alignment with a belief system or a value system, and that we're ready to move on or let go of that. And so if you're in a position where you're kind of having some of those themes come up for you, you might be really sitting with that, reflecting on that during this full moon on the 3rd. Things that might be positive to manifest into your life for this full moon could be aligning yourself with education or ideologies that are in the direction of the path that you want to move forward in your life. So if you've been wanting to travel somewhere or sign up for a class or take some kind of educational program, and you've been kind of on the fence about whether or not you want to do it, you might start to feel kind of that push, you know, of to make a decision. What do you want to do, you know, with that? So this also, around the 3rd, you might feel inclined to want to get out of town and do something that's more adventurous or expressive. With where the trine is happening in the chart, there's a really good opportunity for self-expression. And excuse me, I was trying to like breathe in that sneeze, but I couldn't. There's a lot of opportunity for you to kind of want to feel this boost in self-expression, creative energy, or be around things that kind of ignite that in you, having the fire trine energy. So yeah, creative self-expression is going to be a big theme. and also, you know, wanting to do something that gives you kind of this like freeing feeling in life. You might kind of feel like a desire to be impulsive and spontaneous around the beginning of June for this reason, having a lot of this fire energy, making this trine to you. Because again, like Mars is in Leo now. And so Mars and Aries make a trine to each other, and it really boosts that fiery desire to be impulsive and creative and spontaneous, but it also boosts reactivity and impulsivity that can be destructive. So again, it's kind of that thing where you want to lean into the things that give you a zest for life, you know, but you also don't want to lean into it so much that you become reckless or hurt parts of your life that you've worked really hard on solidifying. So finding that balance is going to be hard for Aries in June, but you benefit a lot from having more of this ambitious creative energy. Let's go ahead and see what's going on. So Venus is going to enter the Leo party shortly after. I'm going to get this chart that I'm looking at to have Venus. So Venus has been in Cancer. Venus has been in Cancer since May. She entered Cancer the beginning of the second week of May. And so then she's kind of doing the same thing, you know, after being in Cancer. After the first week, she's going to be entering Leo. And so she's going to be joining the Mars party in Leo. And this is going to be a really positive energy for Aries because, again, Leo and Aries make that trine to each other. And Venus in Leo is a really powerful time for connecting to our inner child, more of the youthful part of ourselves, the part that wants to explore, create, and just experience joy and play without any kind of restrictions. And so while Venus is passing through this area, Venus is going to be here for a really long time because she stations retrograde in Leo in July, at the end of July. So her stint in Leo lasts until October. So she doesn't move out of Leo until October. So we have this really long stint of Venus in Leo. And where this hits in the Aries horoscope has to do with that inner child expression. You know, how do you not take life so seriously and just allow yourself to play even when you're an adult? Like what in life brings you to kind of be able to express yourself in a more creative, fun, you know, non-judgmental way? I think Aries is pretty good at that. If Aries is in its full expression of self, Aries can be really fun, playful, hilarious. Like I think about a lot of my favorite Aries, my husband's an Aries and he's got a hilarious sense of humor, but it comes off really serious. Like it's a very dry sense of humor, which I personally really love, dry sense of humor. Paul Rudd is an Aries who I think also masters a dry sense of humor. He's really good at just doing that like stoic, you know, kind of one-liner kind of stuff that lands in a way that's really funny. My husband and I are big Paul Rudd fans. And also the actor, I think his name's Glenn something. I can't remember his last name, but he plays Dennis on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He's an Aries. I think the actor who plays Mac is also an Aries, but that character Dennis is always like that too. Like he has that serious demeanor, but says stuff that's also very problematic and mean, but it just lands in a way, to me at least, that's really, really funny. And the woman on It's Always Sunny, that actress whose name I'm blanking on right now, but the one who's married to Mac in real life, she and I actually have the same birthday. She's a Leo. And so it's just funny. There's like all these fire signs and a Gemini together on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And they're all, the way that the humor is super aggressive, super loud, but also really dry, also really problematic. And it's just really funny to me. And it's just something that I laughed about because we really like that show. But I just think of like the way Leo and Aries energy is. It's very, it likes to hype each other up. It likes to feed off each other's spontaneity and impulsivity. It really enjoys being playful and just not taking things seriously, but almost doing things in a joke way that come off serious, that dry sense of humor. And so Venus and Leo passing through with Mars in this area of creativity in June, I think really enhances the Aries ability to not take things so seriously, have more fun, have more play, and just enjoy life and do it in a way that's really fulfilling. So we have a lot of transits happening in June that I go over in the June 2023 horoscope. So kind of the way that I enjoy talking about the horoscopes is, or I guess the forecast is what I meant, but the way I enjoy talking about the horoscopes is just kind of where these planetary shifts are moving into the houses. But when it comes to the aspects, those are so specific to how it hits you in your personal chart that I think listening to the June forecast is more constructive. So I recommend going and listening to the June forecast of how each transit is hitting and looking at where that hits in your own birth chart. But in terms of like what houses are highlighted for the horoscope, that's what I like to emphasize in the horoscope chart rather than going through each little individual aspect. But the overall theme for Aries and for a lot of us this month in June is going to be creative expression without judgment and allowing ourselves to play and explore what that means to us. And that's very true for the Aries horoscope because of the houses that are illuminated during this time for you. So Venus and Mars will be from June 11th on together in that area of creative self-expression. And it's important that you're building confidence around your creative self-expression. I think that, you know, the reason why Leo gets so much emphasis on us being self-centered or self-focused is because we're more out there about ourselves, where Aries tends to be more reserved and private in their internal world. But what I found about a lot of my Aries people that I have in my life is that's because they're not as confident in how to put that self out there as maybe a Leo energy is. And so this might be a time for the Aries individual to be less private and less, you know, like that private self world is cut off from expressing itself. You're getting a boost to put yourself out there. Leo likes to share. That fifth house energy is about sharing the self. It's not about hoarding the self, which is kind of what Aries does. Aries is very much like, I like creative self-expression, but for myself, go away, you know? And Leo is more like, I like creative self-expression and I want to share that with everybody. I think Aries is a little more gatekeepy in a similar way as Scorpio. Like it has kind of that more like Mars energy in that way. And it's a little more competitive, you know, and Leo can be very competitive too, but Leo likes to share. Like Leo likes to kind of be open with everything. And so there might be some of that getting emphasized for Aries, having that Leo trine to the Aries energy. So it's a great time to share yourself, a great time to work on building confidence and expressing yourself and sharing yourself and not worrying about judgment from other people. Not that you would, but just, you know, don't worry about it. Mercury is going to enter Gemini on the 11th and actually enter the area of the Aries chart that does have to do with communication. I'm really looking forward to this transit because Mercury is the ruler of Gemini, and I'm just grateful to have a time where Mercury is passing through its area of domicile, doing its thing. And I think that for you, it's in a really positive placement because it's in the house that it traditionally rules. And so you get this boost in having a lot of this kind of way to absorb information, especially scientific or analytical information. This is supported for you. It's enhanced, it's boosted. It's a great time to be working on things in that capacity. Also, this area of the chart rules neighbors. And so if you are working on having any constructive conversations with people that you live closely with, it also rules siblings. So connecting to siblings or neighbors or that type of stuff is also supported with Mercury passing through this area. Mercury is going to enter Cancer on the 27th and move into the area of the Aries chart that has to do with home and family. So by the end of June, this is kind of true across the board for all of us because we'll be in Cancer season by the end of June, but we also have a bunch of transits in the signs of Pisces and Cancer that will kind of, you know, we have this very extroverted June, and then the end of June we start to feel kind of depleted and like we need to start restoring and turning inwards and rejuvenating. And so when Mercury enters Cancer at the end of the month, it will be entering that area of the chart, and we'll have the sun in this area of the chart where you're going to really want to hunker in and be home quite a lot, which Venus has been passing through there already, so that energy's already been present in the chart for you. But we're going to have this stint where you're more extroverted and more focused on creative expression and kind of, you know, having fun and doing things that you want to do. And then, you know, the end of the month's going to come and you're going to be like, I want to connect with my family and people that I consider my family, but I also want to hunker in and be home and, you know, more self-focused. So that's also a theme that's happening for you at the end of the month. Let's kind of go backwards and talk about the new moon that we're going to have in Gemini. So we have a new moon happening on June 18th at 26 degrees of Gemini. So again, this is happening in the house that represents your communication. And so this is a really positive time for you to set intentions around ways that you can communicate information in maybe a more analytical way. I think that one of the things about a lot of Aries people is that mutable signs look at things in steps. And so mutable signs, when they're communicating, and I'm bringing this up because Gemini is the mutable air sign that rules communication, we're looking at the complexity of a story. And I say we because I have a lot of mutable energy, but I'm like a very mutable person. But mutable signs look at the complexity of a situation as a story. So there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then there's all these things in between that play a role in why there's a beginning, middle, and an end. And so for mutable signs, when you're forming a plan or a dialogue or explaining something, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of nuances to it. And it can feel sometimes to someone that's not like that as too much. It can feel like too much information, too much story, too many moving parts or pieces that you don't need. And so mutable signs tend to come off like a lot and can feel very draining because we're explaining a lot of things at one time that maybe, sure, we don't need to explain, or we could say the same thing in 5 different ways because we want it to land, because we know not everybody hears things the same way. Linear people like Aries, Capricorn, Cancer, Libra is not super linear, but more linear than mutable people. Fixed people are more linear than mutable people. Aries as a sign in communication, a lot of times can say things in a very straightforward, blunt way without explaining things. And so what happens a lot of times is that they're misunderstood because the person on the receiving end is forced to make assumptions about all of the potentials that could be said about the straightforward thing. The Aries person thinks that there is only one way to see it because that's how they see it. But I think if we know things about different brain, like kind of learning styles, like everybody hears things through their own filter and everybody absorbs things in a different way. And so what a linear straightforward thing is to one person might not come off the same way to another person, which is really common in why people misunderstand each other. And so my husband, I'm going to bring my husband and I up in this because this is a great example of this new moon in Gemini for Aries. So my husband is an Aries sun with Mercury in Aries conjunct his sun. I'm a Leo, but I have Mercury in Virgo, which is a mutable energy. My descendant is also in Gemini. So the way I relate in my relationships is very mercurial. And the way I communicate is very mercurial. I also have a 3rd house moon, so in Placidus. So the way that my lunar communication, emotional needs are, I have a lot of very like mercurial energy in my chart in a mutable way. And so what my husband a lot of times will do is he'll say something and I either have to ask questions about it because he's not giving me enough information. And what'll happen a lot of times is he'll get annoyed that I'm asking questions about it because he thinks that he said it in a very clear, direct way. And I'm like, yeah, but I could take it 5 different ways. Like you could mean this, you could mean that, you could mean this, you could mean that. And then he'll be like, well, this is what I mean. And then he'll give me backstory. And then I'll go, okay, that makes sense now. I can understand that now. I didn't want to make an assumption. And sometimes he'll say, well, I think you should try to just make an assumption because that seems obvious to me. So then this is the funny part. The times when I make the assumption, I tend to be wrong. And the part that I assume that he would mean is not what he means, right? And so I don't like making assumptions because what I assume is not necessarily what is accurate, right? And so for me, having a mutable Mercury, I'm thinking about that. I think about, okay, you said this one thing, but it could mean 5 other things. And he'll think that he shouldn't have to give backstory or steps or anything. And a lot of times too, he'll say something in the middle of a thought without giving any context. And he'll just assume that I'm already here with him. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So then he has to backtrack and explain the backstory and catch me up to speed, right? And so I think that it's just different ways people's brains work, right? For me, when I'm telling a story, I know that that person doesn't have that backstory. So I know if I start in the middle, somebody's probably gonna be like, what are you talking about? And I will do that too sometimes, we're all capable of doing that, but it's not my main communication style. And so I've had to try to teach my husband how to communicate with me more constructively because if I make an assumption, I'm probably gonna be wrong. And if he starts in the middle of a story, I'm not going to know what he's talking about because I don't have the background of the story. So this new moon in Gemini, getting back to you, it's happening in the third house of communication for the Aries horoscope, and it's in Gemini. And Gemini is analytical and tells stories in a very thorough way because it's mutable. So Gemini can also seem very scattered and like it says too much or too much of the same thing. What's really common with a lot of my Gemini dominant people in my life who also have Mercury in Gemini, they repeat themselves a lot. And so do I, having Mercury in Virgo. I also do this. But Mercury and Gemini, it can be kind of frustrating sometimes because you've heard the same thing, you know, maybe 5 times in a couple different ways. And you're like, okay, I get it. You don't need to say that anymore. And that's usually what people say to me, having Mercury and Virgo. They're like, I get it. You don't need to say that anymore. So for Gemini mercurial placements, you really have to work on what information do I need to get across that's valuable, where I say just enough, but not too much, but not too little, right? And so this new moon is because we also have Juno in this new moon combination where she's there, where it's impacting our relationships, especially partnership dynamics. So anyone that we're in a close partnership dynamic with, we're reflecting during this new moon on how we're communicating. So for Aries, you know, obviously every Aries is different. You might have Mercury in a different placement, but if you have a very linear communication pattern, this is an opportunity for you to grow beyond that and for you to find maybe more of this middle ground on the mutable side and the linear side, because they're both valuable. It's really valuable to be able to communicate in a very straightforward way without repeating yourself a million times, because that gets exhausting. It's also really constructive, though, to know how to tell the beginning, middle, and ending to the person listening, because that's also valuable. You can't assume that everybody's in your head with you, which is very common for Aries. And so, I think that that theme for the new moon for Aries is working on that in your communication, working on how you perceive information, how you disseminate that information, and how you are looking at the complexities of information rather than just one linear way, because that's just not how Gemini works. So I think that's going to be a big theme for you. Also, just for the month of June, where we have Mercury passing through Gemini, it's a really good opportunity for you to work on those things. A couple other things I'll make note of before I wrap up your horoscope, Aries. We've got Saturn stationing retrograde in Pisces on the 17th, and it's going to be retrograde until November, I believe. I go into that a little bit more in the June astrology forecast video. So if you want more on that, you can watch that. And then Neptune is also going to be stationing retrograde on the 30th at 27 degrees of Pisces. So we'll have Neptune retrograde in Pisces up until it looks like December of this year. So we're entering that kind of, you know, outer planet retrograde period that is pretty intense. And, you know, that area that it's hitting for you is the area that rules the subconscious. And so even though we don't really talk about outer planets in a horoscope, it's just kind of interesting to know that that's a theme for the rest of the year, is that your subconscious and your relationship to the subconscious and maybe things from the past coming up in a deeper emotional way are going to be worked through a lot this year for you. And then we enter Cancer season, I believe, on the 22nd. Let me just double check. I feel like it was the 21st. It's the 22nd in the ephemeris, but I want to make sure that I am saying that right. I already talked about it in the other forecast. Yeah, it's the 21st. So the summer solstice is usually on the 21st every year, but you know, sometimes they move around a little bit. So we'll have that summer solstice. And again, that's when the Cancer cycle starts in that area of the chart that influences your relationship to home and family, and where you're going to start turning inward. You're going to have this very active, creative time. And then by the 21st, you're going to slowly start to feel burnout, and you're going to start to slowly want to retreat inward and focus on more self-care. So it's a good time to do that. All right, Aries, that is your June horoscope. I wish you luck. If you liked this video, feel free to comment, hit the like, hit the subscribe. I can't believe that I had 152 views from Aries this last month, and that there's barely any likes or comments on it for how, I mean, I've got a good amount of likes for me. I don't get that many, but for how many views I had, I thought I would have gotten a little bit more action. we'll see. Anyways, I'll see you next time. Good luck for June. Have fun. Enjoy what this month has to bring.